happily working in his letterpress studio called Dukenberg Studio and Press, and he's teaching at the Center for Book Arts. He also is the tech, and he teaches lessons at ARM Letterpress. He's taught at the Penland School of Crafts many times. And this is something I was really fascinated with. He was a designer and a printer at Yeehaw in Knoxville for years. And I hope you mentioned something about that. I was dying to hear about it. His MFA is from the University of Tennessee. And what I liked when I asked him to send a bio, he said, I love working on and with printing presses. So we're looking forward to hearing your talk. Thank you.
Yes, I did go to the University of Tennessee for grad school. Before that, I went to Ohio University. That's where I first learned letterpress. And basically, I just kind of helped excavate an SB15 that was buried underneath a whole bunch of fixtures for fluorescent tubes and things like that. And it was pretty self-taught at first, and then I kind of took little classes here and there and built my way up until I got to Knoxville. I'm going to jump ahead all the way to the middle of grad school where something great happened to me, and it's where I found this piece of trash that started a whole series of work. And it says, hold cannot be used, size does not exist. And it's one of my favorite things. I pick up little bits of junk all over the place. You'll see a project in a second that's based on that. But I love the idea. Obviously, this rejected tag is connected to something that didn't fit within the tolerances of a machinist's scheme. But I really like the idea of two things being connected, like an idea being connected to an object, or rather, one object being connected to another one that can possibly precede cognitive activity. So I started making these part tags where the upper left one, has a flag on it, that would be just one part tag that would need two objects to explain something. And it gets more exciting to say, oh, what if I need three objects to explain one thing, or what if three things can't be explained without the other components? And then I started doing more and more, like 14 objects that have to go together, or 48 things need to explain one specific concept. And after I got to the point where I started doing one that actually had information come from, and I started making what I would consider the primordial ooze of paperwork. As if these are manila cardstock, and they're about this big. And I really wanted to express the notion of if that material had spilled on the floor, it would form naturally into these part tags. And it got pretty exciting. I was really into these. I put them away for a long time. I recently started cutting them. Again, these are all hand cut, little carving tools I make out the corners with. And at some point, it's like, I'm really tired of having conversations where people are talking about these imaginary things, and it always was really, really, really vague. And I like the idea of what people do when they can't explain something. And so I started a project. This was called Curiosity and Debris. And I made a whole bunch of these little pouches. They were about this large, and they had a Velcro top. You could stuff something about the size of a coffee cup into it. And inside the envelope, when I handed it out, was an ink pen, and I said, go about your daily business and find something you can't explain the origin of. How did this thing end up in my drawer? Why is this under my couch? Why is this in my yard? Or what is this thing I just found on the street? And I said, find the thing you have no idea what it is or how it came to be, and then fill out the form. And at the top it asks for the date and the location, the time, and the finder. And then it talks about the materials, the structure, the circumstantial position it was in, like you think it was lost or you think it was discarded. There's a possible use category, a physical description, and the most important section at the bottom is the speculative history. And this was part of a whole series of things that is for the PAR Association, which is the Peripheral Association Research Association, which is a mouthful on purpose. But I really like impossible tasks, and the idea of asking someone to find something they can't explain and then fully explain it was really, I thought, kind of poetic. And so this was one of the objects that was in the bag, and it's a toy from like a Burger King or McDonald's. It's an asteroid that apparently got burned up in some sort of reentry. And so, I'll show a couple of the objects. Strange pieces of iron, like is this part of an old tool? Is this part of an old fence? Office tool? And the exciting thing about the show is when it was on display, some people knew exactly what this object was, other people had no idea. And the way they were displayed was it would be just the bag and the object beside it. And some people were wildly poetic. Some people were incredibly scientific. Some people just drew pictures in all the boxes, trying to finish where this thing possibly could have come from. And I kind of was suspect that it might happen, but to a greater degree than I ever imagined, people came to the show and read everything and started talking about them as portraits of the people who filled out the form. Because Jason Boardman talks about objects in a completely way that Jesse Yarborough does. And ended up, I had 100 people in the show, and it turned out, it was really, really fun. And some of the objects were totally ridiculous. This one here is a whole bunch of VHS tape with orange peels in it. It was found in a parking lot on my pal Jason Bowman. And he actually took the time to splice it back onto reel, load it into the machine, and he said he played sections and sections and sections. It was always blank until he got, after he was getting ready to stop, the picture became completely clear. It was Jerry Garcia playing a solo. And so he wrote about the whole experience on his little piece of paperwork. So I got kind of stuck on doing these series where it'd be a mass amount of paperwork to fill out. And I started this particular show. I did all the paperwork, and it was it's the Certification of Ingenuity Preliminary Assessment Form. And so I'd go around and just document things that people would do where they suspend their understanding of an object and use it in another way, almost like a rigging of some sort. And I was never interested in people doing interesting things with duct tape. Like fixing your car with duct tape is definitely using tape as tape. But using a chair to repair your fence is fantastic. Or using something as simple as flipping over a shopping cart to make a barricade around this little pylon/hole in a parking lot. And I was just trying to get to the bottom of what happens when people have at one point I was calling it a trans-applicationary revelation. It can be something else. And it's not that they're taking a section out of it and be like, I want a piece of plastic, so I'm cutting this out of the frisbee. They use the whole frisbee to do something completely else. This was one of my favorites. And it was foam cowboy hat that got shoved through a little section of broken glass. So the material itself was an insulator, and it puffed open and filled perfectly. And it stayed in that neighborhood, because I go through there on my way to work, like, all through the winter. So all of that, those sorts of things I was doing as I was starting my miniature career at Lehigh Industries. When I was in grad school, I started working here just by the good nature of the folks who started the shop. Kevin Bradley and Julie Belcher knew that I was interested in letterpress and had experience, and they said, hey, come on in and make some posters for your band or help these people out. And after I did 2 or 3 projects, they handed me some money and said, hey, come back tomorrow and do this job for us. We really need some help printing. And I started doing like the birth announcements. And birth announcements at Lehigh Industries are pretty fun. I don't know if this is read or not. They hailed the day he was born, and they say that he made an entrance with a full set of sideburns and made his mama cry because he was a rock star. All these, the people who retired Lehigh built Lehigh into what it became. It's a really, really fun place to work. And it's all hand-set type. If we needed an image, it would be we would get a mag plate made. And it was predominantly the music business. And there were pretty large runs. I was here for 6 years as a full-time printer and designer. 2 years prior to that, just as a part-time guy coming in, because I was still in grad school. And they just gave me loads of time to experiment. Like on Monday mornings, we would come in. We'll get back to that. And we would just divide the work. Say, we need to do a poster for Bonnaroo this year. Who wants to do it? And we just divide up the work, and then we start contacting the clients. And we had a whole lot of freedom. The most we'd ever give anyone was a thumbnail sketch. We said, we're going to do something kind of like this. Are you on board? And then we'd print out 500 copies of it. To pay the bills, when the music industry isn't full of money, we would do little cards like this. I love you and thank you. And this will start looking like a poetry project that you'll see pictures of here in a second. But these little greeting cards led to our experiments with just printing and putting them into little gift shops led us to do, these are from Alpha Blocks, which were recently recast by the Dale Guild Type Foundry. These are an older set, but just had a lot of fun, and we were putting out products that we were taking on as projects for ourselves most often. And the whole crew at EHA was really, really passionate, which I believe allowed us to get the jobs that we did. Like for the National Gallery of Art, we did all of their promotional materials for the Dada show when we had the big retrospective in 2006. And wildly exciting things could happen. I don't think it's not wildly exciting, it's pretty exciting. But we were just staying up all night printing and just making crazy prototypes. And Kevin, the fellow I was working with, had cut out a piece of paper and dropped it on the floor. And so there's a white piece of paper with a hole in it, and I could see the floor kind of sticking through. I was like, I'm going to cut the floor out, something like that. And it actually is. The poster was about this big. We were printing on a pocket etching press. And we had a section of floor that we recently had to remove that was still in the basement. So I tacked it all back together and put it on the bandsaw. And just kept on just embracing, like, what is it to play with type? And it was the Dada show was the perfect one to do that with. This is in process as I started working the lockup. And we did a lot of work for free, which would allow me to experiment and just learn how to do silly, silly things that we weren't getting paid for. And when that's the case, like you can, like no one can say no. And we had a little museum show, and there's a slide that was missing, but we were steeped in history. Like we have this huge archive of old blocks and typography that allows me to just build anything I could. If I wanted 60-line type, we had it. If I wanted stuff that was 120 line, I could use that. And I got totally psyched. And these are 42 by 30 something. And I guess there's the notion someone was talking earlier about at lunch about bigger being better and more exciting. I got really invested in this, and I felt pretty good about it, but I wanted to find my own little niche within EHA. This slide is out of order, but this is an example of our poster work that we do for bands and things. But this is the one I was trying to get to. So I started doing really tedious things. Like Kevin Bradley was notorious for dumping out drawers of 6-point type, like because he couldn't stand it. And I was like, no, I needed that. I actually have a form standing, and I can put that away. And but I started just trying to set type on curves, and I was like really, really getting invested. And thanks. And so this is this nonsense being spouted from a Gene Autry gun. And the first time I ever showed this to someone, the first proof of it, I said, yeah, just every other letter said noun, vowel, consonant. And she goes, that's my name. Like the first person I showed it to, it'll be Bryan and Anita. But totally random. First person I showed it actually had her name in it. And to do those kind of things, we had so much to deal with at EHA. I don't know what made me do it, but I started having to build my own furniture. So I started slicing up Pabst cans and rolling these things with quads and some spacing material, and building custom furniture to do more adventurous little typesetting things. And, well, too much cooking. I got really excited about pattern, and it could be that the other folks at EHA were getting more and more invested in the typography and doing pages dominated with type, so I started doing pages dominated by pattern. All this stuff is cut on a Hammond glider. It's about 18 by 24. Again, just pushing the text totally away, just making these pieces that are based on patterning. There's the picture of the Hammond glider. There's another picture of a closer version. And so I'm just making these wood blocks and having a blast. 7-inch record number in the back. And so I was getting really interested in layering of ink and just, I'm trying to think of a way to put it, losing so much interest in working with clients, because every single day I was printing a job for someone, even if it was a job completely of my design. I said, I want to do a whole series of poetry prints that no one's going to tell me what to do. And I got, these are really, really enormous 2-word poems. And yes and no, and this and that, and even those, off and on, nope and yes. Just to break it up, like, because as I said, we were there till stupid o'clock in the morning every night, going back and forth, back and forth. And Yeehaw started giving us breaks, just like, take a week and do whatever you want. And so I was able to do these kind of little projects while I was there. Side angle with those. Am I moving back and forth too much? Is it making anyone sick? No, I mean with the that was kind of a joke leading into vocals that I started doing. The joking of having the show that was a poetry was all 2-word poems led me to start writing actual songs. And I play ukulele and bass. And I got invited to do a show at a gallery that has musical events and art shows, and I didn't know when they sent the correspondence, they didn't say which one it was going to be. And I was like, wow, I want to do both at once. And so I made a series of ukulele prints where I wrote all the songs, and then I went around the gallery and performed. I serenaded everyone as they would come to each piece. And they were called sad songs for busy people. And there's like the most heartbreaking songs I could think of, and they were all under a minute long. Goofy. Anyway, I'm talking about this stuff. I feel very embarrassed now. This is a really bad image. Well, my fault, I'm sure. But, so this is a close-up that I get really geeky and nerdy. As I mentioned with my bio, I love working on presses and with presses. And I got out my micrometer and I measured the thickness of this particular piece of paper that I had. I was like, if I had 5 pieces of this paper stacked up to make a sheet of plywood, how big would the square be for that sheet? And so I ended up making miniature 3/4-inch 4x8 plywood at 1 to 26.1 scale. But anyway, so it's like completely miniaturized plywood, and it's printed on both sides. And when it's done, it actually is really, really sturdy plywood. It's exactly the scale. And that was the last thing I did at Yeehaw before I'm moving to New York City. Followed my girlfriend, now wife, to the city 2 years ago. And I worked in a commercial shop doing this and that. I started teaching at the Center for Book Arts. But at one point, I just got shipped off to the University of Iowa when they got this press. It's a 3228 Vanderbilt. And they said, we just bought this press and we want you to show us how to use it, what it does, and get the students excited about it. So I was like, so what do you have to work with? And they didn't have any type at all. I was like, whoa. So I'd done 1 dice print in the past when I was at Yeehaw, and I had like a little collection of 15 dice. And so I just bought 2,000 dice, and I went to Iowa and started setting up these patterns. And I did a series of prints. These are some close-ups just so you understand that when you see one of them, usually people are typesetters at it. They think that there's leading between the dice, but they're actually set solid. And the Stonehenge paper mentioned earlier. This is Stonehenge. And they're pretty large. It's 1,100 and some dice styled in. And I was really interested in the idea of, like say, a field of random order coming up against a field of that almost like a lattice pattern. 2s versus 5s, 1s versus 3s. That one here looks like a quilted paper towel. And again, like more gentle actions where, like, say, there's a random order being poured through this little composition of 5s and 4s. I got really excited about just making actual patterns likened to the poster work I was doing. And I guess this change came about in my career because I wasn't working in a commercial shop at all. Like, I didn't have a client, so I was just making my art, as it were. Different sorts of patterns coming up against each other. They're really, really pretty, and it kind of bugged me for a while, but I thought they were so pretty, and people were complimenting on how pretty these things were. And the earlier stuff I was doing with the little pouches and the bags and the paperwork was not very pretty. I mean, it was really fun and exciting, but it wasn't pretty, and I think I've come to terms with that, and I like making pretty things. More complicated patterning, so this one and the next one are from the exact same situation. I just tessellated some of the sections into each other, so you might be able to see the overlap of how the systems work together. And that is just barely under 17 by 21. These are all named after constellations, or stars in particular constellations. Like Mu, Aura, Luigi, Beta, Cassiopeia, things like that, because there's an infinite number of combinations that I'm never going to get all the way through. So I decided I might as well start naming them after stars, and I'll erase the people naming the stars with the little prints I made. But they make me think of, again, systems of information, some sort of cellular structures sometimes. I think of the itty-bitty ones. This is just up with the 100 and some dice. But this one maybe has a reference for some sort of cellular structure, or things sliding between one area and another. Almost organic, somehow definitely mechanical. I like the idea of different sorts of movement, different kind of flow. And also like the fact that this one is the exact same set of dice. I'm constantly tumbling them over, making new compositions out of the same exact form. And where's my list? As of yet, so there,
do you need water? I can bring some water.
No, I'm almost done.
I know where it is. It's outside on the table. I can get it. You take the movie.
So people ask me often, why are they all red? Why don't you do another color? And this one's orange. And I do and the reason I just very specifically limited myself to, thanks so much, working with just that particular range of red, because I mix the color red, like it's different versions of red every single time. So when they're hung, they have slight bits of vitality to each one, but they all work as a family. But there's so much for me to explore with just a pattern that if I start bringing in like hot pink and crazy blue. In any case, I eventually did succumb, and I did a dark brown one. Just to stop people talking about it. Like, I can do other colors, I'm not in a real red. And the next step, of course, like as soon as I stop feeling like I can, or as soon as I start having the feeling that I'm finished with just a one color, one bit of array, I'm going to start layering the colors the way I was layering the diamond patterns. And I've done some proofs. I haven't shown them yet, but it's pretty exciting. We have 3 layers of dice on top of each one. But in any case, I went through this pretty fast, but that was my last little slide. Thanks for coming.
We're going to have a 15-minute break, okay?
I didn't get your name on the tape. Stop. Say your name.
Bryan. Marcia's back.
I started the tape before you. Now tell me about yourself.
Oh, I talk at RUTGERS.
Okay, there you go. That's who it is.